Look, y'all, they say that the Ravens have one of the hardest schedules in the league. So how, as Ravens fans, how do we have this luck every single year? But you know what? I'm not even worried about it. I'm not even worried about it. I'm really not. Secondly, RG3 not part of the Monday Night Football crew anymore. Is this a big L for ESPN and their coverage and a little bit of realism that he brought? We'll talk about that. And also the future of Odafe Oweh as a Raven. The 5th-year option was extended, but will Odafe Oweh be extended? Is this going to be his breakout year? This and plenty more to talk about right here on this show on Flock Nation Speaks. So get your popcorn, get your drink or your snack. We just, we ain't exclusive to popcorn. Get your snack, get your drink, and we're gonna come back and talk about everything there is to talk about with these Ravens and everything going on, because the schedule is out, and you know for a fact we gotta jump into that one. All right, welcome into Flock Nation Speaks. Flock Nation Speaks. Flock Nation Speaks, your Baltimore Ravens podcast, where we talk about the best team in NFL history. If you're a Ravens fan, I am a huge Joe Flacco fan. Wise Usher once said, "Situations will arise in our lives." I'm talking about shut down. Like you not throwing on Jimmy Smith. Joe is criminally underrated. Like lock him up in cuffs. Criminally underrated. Lamar's put this team as a top 5 offense for the first time in 20 years. Got the arm talent. Jay Cutler had it too. I don't care about this argument against total TDs and all this. Oh, you want to talk about defense? Oh, until next time. All right, welcome back to Flock Nation Speaks, your Baltimore Ravens podcast, where we talk about the best team in NFL history. If you're a Ravens fan, of course, look. I don't care what the schedule say. They still the best team in NFL history. If you're a Ravens fan, of course, I'm just telling y'all. But I'm your host, DJ, and I'm back once again to talk about these Baltimore Ravens, man. How y'all been doing? First things first, hope all y'all been well. Keeping up with everything that's been going on. Ignore the fit today, okay? I'm just gonna be honest with y'all. I wasn't like halfway Bengal today or nothing like that. This is an old combination from the middle school days, okay? That's what it is. It matches. Don't come at me in the comments, okay? If you can't see the outfit, don't go to YouTube to go look. But anywho, look, man. Let's talk about this schedule. Let's jump right into this, because yesterday the schedule got kicked off. All right, we got we was hearing inklings of what might happen. We was hearing the Chiefs and the Ravens was going to start the season. We was excited. All right, I think all of us was quite excited. We were ready, right? We were ready. But sources we just talking about the sources. The sources say that the Ravens have one of the hardest schedules in the NFL, and I'm just sitting here thinking again. It's funny because I've seen through my just looking at the pulse of the Ravens flock and everything. I've seen a little bit of panic, right? Last year was the year to get it done, and this year I don't know. And then John Harbaugh's still there, so can we win with John? Like, I get it. Look, I understand. I'm right here with y'all. All right, we together on this. We've been together for a while now, and I get it. I understand where you coming from. But at the same time, I don't give a darn about how hard this schedule is. Okay, I really don't. Now I know for a fact, all y'all, I know y'all have seen what the schedule looks like. Okay, I know y'all have seen what the schedule looks like. I'm gonna be honest, I ain't even really looked at it yet. Is that bad? Should I say that out loud? I haven't looked at the whole schedule in its entirety. You know what I did? I said, you know what? I'm gonna sit down and I'm gonna look at the schedule. And then I got to about week 6. I got to week 6 and I said, you know what? No, I gotta wait. I gotta wait and give my first initial reactions. with my people over on Fly Nation Speaks and all of y'all. So I said, you know what? Let me just wait. I didn't even look at the schedule. I did pull it up, but I did not look at it. Not in its entirety, at least. Okay, so let me pull this up real quick. All right, because they say it's one of the toughest. All right, they say it is one of the toughest schedules in the NFL, and I'm just sitting here thinking, did y'all not see what we went through like last year? Like, what's the difference? What's the difference between this schedule and what the Ravens went through last year? But as we take a deeper look into it, let's look. So we got week 1, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. No, I'm wrong. I'm looking too deep into this. Look, I can't even read the schedule. Okay, I'm so excited. Look, all right. So week 1, we got Kansas City. Like, we got the Kansas City Chiefs on the road. Kind of, that AFC Championship rematch. I know a lot of people are thinking about that one. A lot of people are excited about that one. And the Ravens, to me, haven't been. I feel like Kansas City hasn't been kind to the Ravens, especially in the regular season either. So that'll definitely be an interesting one. But let me run down the list and then I'll kind of get my commentary on it real quick. So then you got the Raiders in week 2 at home. You go back on the road to the Dallas Cowboys, and you come back home to Buffalo. Then you go back to the road to Cincinnati, and then you go back home. Not too, nobody traveling too far on this one, but back home with the Washington Commanders. Then you go back on the road. It's the weird part. Like, usually the Ravens have these stretches of road games and home games, but early on in this season, at least, they ain't really got no back-to-backs. But so you got Washington at home, then you get Tampa Bay on the road. I was looking too deep into the schedule. All right, Tampa Bay on the road in week 7. Week 8 will be the Cleveland Browns on the road, and then Denver at home, Cincinnati at home, back on the road to Pittsburgh, back on the road in the Harbaugh Bowl on Thanksgiving Day with the LA Chargers. Not LA. Yeah, they are LA. I'm thinking San Diego. The LA Chargers. All right, and then you got starting off December, one of the big months. Usually I feel like the Ravens don't have a bye week this late. I feel like last year the bye week was late, but typically I don't feel like the Ravens have bye weeks this late, but lately it's been like that. But December, to start off December, they have the Eagles, and then they have a bye week, and then coming back middle of December is the New York Giants. Then you got that rematch at home against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Then you're gonna finish off the season. You got Christmas Day game on good old Netflix, Christmas Day game with the Houston Texans, and then to be determined with the Cleveland Browns to end the season. Now, I feel like looking at the schedule, knee-jerk reaction to the schedule, I'm looking at Kansas City. That's a tough one, of course, to start the season. Dallas is going to be tough. Buffalo is going to be tough. Of course, the in-division games, we know those are going to be tough. Tampa could be a tough one to get, but it could, it still be. It's possible that it still be a tough game. You got the kind of new look Denver Broncos. We'll see what they got up their sleeves. You got, of course, the Harbaugh Bowl and that aspect of things too. Possibly AFC Championship preview, depending on what the Chargers want to do this season too. So you got that as well. You got a top team in the NFC and the Eagles. The first time, I think this is the first time. I don't think it's the first time, but it's been a little while since the Ravens and the Eagles have played, especially with Jalen Hurts under center. And then, of course, Pittsburgh, and then Houston to Houston and the Browns down the stretch. Man, like, that's a lot to take in right there. Like I think it is a tough schedule. But it's interesting to see as you look at kind of the reaction, because first things first, Warren Sharp, he mentioned, and I'll bring this up for y'all too. He mentioned that the Ravens weeks 1 through 5 schedule is the hardest, especially when you look at Kansas City, you look at Dallas, you look at Cincinnati. Obviously, Cincinnati trying to get themselves back to where they have been, over the past couple of years, with the injury, without injury and stuff like that. You got the Cowboys, who are always good, always competitive, a really good offense, and hopefully the defense will be more healthy, and we'll see what they do. And then, of course, the defending champs, Kansas City. So having those, that's tough. And then 4 or 5 games or versus teams expected to win 10+ games. I'm assuming that's going down down the schedule. I mean, you probably thinking, if we talking about 4 or 5 teams out of that list, I mean, you probably thinking who we talking 10-win teams. Probably thinking Houston. We probably thinking somebody from the AFC North besides the Ravens will probably end up with 10 wins. Let's see, Kansas City, of course. Let's see, Buffalo probably more than likely is probably projected to win more than that. Oh, it say it right here, and I could just read it. Look, okay, Kansas City is, and so these are the projected 10-win teams. Kansas City, I'm over here guessing, and I think I guessed right though. So Kansas City, you got the Bengals, you got the Cowboys, you got the Bills, you got the Eagles, and you got the Texans. Right. So those are the ones projected to be 10. Those are the 4 to 5 projected to be 10-win teams. And it's just very interesting. But I feel like shout out to the kid Gowie, because he did make a good point. Everybody was talking about the schedule. Everybody was talking about how rough this schedule is. And I kind of thought the same thing, but I will echo his sentiment here. He says he reposted a picture of Lamar Jackson being the offensive player of the year back in January 11th when the Ravens had a really tough back end of their schedule. They had teams like the Dolphins, right? Like, teams were really like, oh man, this gonna be tough. I think the Rams were in that little stretch too, but they had plenty of really good teams in that stretch. I mean, the Ravens had some teams that it was like it's gonna be tough to make it out of this schedule alive. Like, it's gonna be tough to make it out of this schedule feeling good. Okay, like this is gonna be one of those times where it's gonna be like, hey, like it's this gonna be a tough one. All right, so I feel like going in to this stretch, I think Gow's got a good point. Like, because he said, mind you, so after reposting this, he said, mind you, the Baltimore Ravens had the toughest remaining schedule, right? Because they had, I can't remember off the top of my head, but I mean, it was a crazy stretch. I know the Dolphins was in there because everybody was worried about the Dolphins because of what, the Dolphins history and all that. I think the Niners was in that little stretch too. And the Ravens were just taking care of business pretty much, they were doing exactly what they needed to do. And I feel like it's kind of going to be rinse and repeat, is what they're going to have to do. They're going to have to just continue to do what they do. And it's interesting because, it is a tough schedule. And I guess that's what you get when you are the AFC runner up. You get one of the tougher schedules, and, you got to just deal with what that means for you. You got to deal with what, you really do. You got to deal with what that's going to mean for the Ravens this season. But I don't think there's any reason to be skeptical, right? I really don't. I don't think there's any reason to be skeptical. I know some guys weighed in because, of course, this is the biggest discussion going on. And the Ravens do this thing. Let me pull this video up so y'all guys can hear it. This is the first time I'm hearing it also. So, Kevin Ostrager's put out that basically the Ravens haters, the Ravens doubters, they're out here, right? They are out here. They are ready to have a conversation about what it is that the Ravens are gonna do. So let's play this.
Because of that brutal start you're talking about. Cincinnati, as I just mentioned, has an easier start. I think Pittsburgh
and Baltimore has a brutally tough start. Is it an overreaction to say that through 5 games this year, the Ravens are going to be in last place in their division?
It's not an overreaction because of that brutal start you're talking about. Cincinnati, as I just mentioned, has an easier start. I think Pittsburgh does too. And just when you look at the opponents, that Week 5 game in Cincinnati, if the Bengals were to win it, yeah, you could see a situation in which the Ravens would be at the bottom of the league's toughest division.
And both.
All right. So mentioning that there's possibility that the Ravens could be at the bottom of the league's quote toughest division, and I don't quote that saying that they're not, because they are in the toughest division. I agree with that, but I will say bottom of the division. Now, like I haven't looked at everybody else's schedule to know if this is possible or not, but the Ravens have shown time and time again that being doubted is not necessarily something you need to do. You don't. I mean, they win a lot more of their games than they lose, especially in situations where it feels like maybe they should lose. Like maybe they're not as talented as said team. Maybe they're not quite where that team it has been building for years and years and years to come. Now, going back to, thinking back to what the schedule says, right? So thinking back to it, when I look at, if we're looking at just them first 5 games, and I'm sure we'll take a deep dive. I know next week probably take a deep dive with Rabbit about this. But looking into them first 5 games, right? I think the thought would be what they could be in the bottom of the division because they lose to KC, they lose to Dallas, they lose to Buffalo, they lose to the Bengals, right? So like that's 4 out of 5 losable games. Like 4 out of, like, not to say the Raiders isn't, but we're talking about teams that are at the top of their divisions. We talking about division leaders, right? We talking about division leaders or close to it. Even with Dallas being division leader throughout the year and then slipping up at the end. But I feel like when I look at this stretch, I've talked about this before. The Bengals are always slow starters. They just are. They're so I think week 5 is definitely a winnable game for the Ravens because the Bengals, just for whatever reason, they always seem to start slow. You could probably say the same thing about Buffalo too. I think week 1 could be a surprising victory. It's one of those where it could go back and forth, but I think the Ravens do get their lick back against Kansas City, right? In a little revenge game and probably a little bit of a prove it game. Can you beat this team, right? Because the Ravens have beaten them, with ironically enough, the Odafe Oweh strip fumble. That's when the Ravens beat them before. So it's possible that they could be in a position to, that would be a win that I feel like it's not must win, but it would be a big. I think that win honestly could propel you to a 5-0 start just because you get that victory on that night to begin the season. In a game where you really want to kind of get your lick back on that one too. So I think the schedule got a lot. There's a lot of layers to it, man. There's a lot of layers to it. We'll definitely in future episodes jump into all of it. But I mean, man, like it's crazy to think, there's a lot of teams that could be potentially 500. There's a lot of teams that were 500 previously. A lot of teams, it's always tough against the Steelers. It's always tough against the Browns. It's always tough against the Bengals. So, you got other teams where it's like, hey, like, the Steelers have felt like they've had the Ravens number for a little bit of time. The Browns usually tend to they tend to split with the Browns for whatever reason. So we'll definitely see. And you always got the NFC guys too, who you don't face very often. You don't face these guys very often too. So I think it's definitely going to be a lot to be said about this schedule, and I think there's plenty to talk about on future episodes. But let's jump into the next thing real quick. So Odafe Oweh got his 5th-year option handed out to him, right? So the Ravens did pick up his 5th-year option, so he will be here at least, through this season. A lot of times, if you do pick, and maybe I'm wrong. Let me know in the comments below. I feel like a lot of times when you pick up the 5th-year option, you kind of putting the guy on like a prove it type year. You putting the guy on a year where it's like, okay, we want to see good things from this guy, but we gotta make sure that this guy is the guy we need to sign long term. Now, when you think about Lamar Jackson and his 5th-year option kind of being picked up, obviously he had proven more throughout his career than Oweh has proven for the Ravens defensively. So I think that's an outlier type situation. I think that's a weird Ravens thing where I feel like sometimes the Ravens struggle to pay certain guys. And Oweh was supposed to be kind of the Matt Judon replacement. He was supposed to be the guy who was going to come in, probably, a little bit raw, but that's kind of how the Ravens like their players. They like their players to be not necessarily specialists in anything. And I've always said, and I said it last year going into the season too, the thing about it is, if you're going to do that, go full throttle into that, right? Maybe not on the offensive line, stop moving people around, but in terms of pass rushers and stuff, like guys who can cover, guys who can rush, then it's a little bit of a different situation. But the hope is Oweh can stay healthy. The hope is Oweh does have a big season this year, and maybe my hope is, and I hate this is why I hate that Jadeveon Clowney is not still in the mix, because you got Oweh and Ajabo who both have struggled to stay healthy, right? Or at least struggle to. I think for Oweh, it's been struggles on the field. I think Ajabo has been struggles to stay on the field. So for me, when I look at it, to have those two guys as kind of your main guys, and I mean, of course, you got Van Noy, but I don't necessarily see Van Noy as a pure pass rusher, right? He's one, kind of like I just said, he's one of those guys that can kind of do it all. You can send him on a blitz if you need to. He can go make the tackles. He can go get you a tackle for loss. I think that's going to be the interesting part. Now, I know they had drafted a edge rusher too, so maybe he sees, but like I said, I'm kind of at a loss for words to a certain degree with the way the Ravens are handling the pass rush situation, because it's similar to the way they handled it last year. Last year, they came in with Ajabo and Oweh, and we saw injuries early. And they, of course, ended up making the late signing to get Jadeveon Clowney, who had one of his best seasons. Honestly, I think it's tied for his best season as a pro. So it was a little surprising to not bring him back, even for the depth aspect of it, even because he showed that he was able to do things that he hasn't been able to do for other organizations. So I don't know. I don't know what their plan is for pass rusher. That's one of my concerns. I think the good part about it is with drafting a corner in the first round. I think the good part about it is pairing him with Humphrey too. I think they could have potential for there to be like a type of a shutdown in the secondary, but I'm a little concerned about the pass rush once again. Even though the Ravens were the team to lead the league in sacks for a lot of the season last year, I'm a little concerned. So back to the initial question: what is Odafe Oweh's future? In my opinion, and y'all can leave y'all's thoughts below. I think I could see him being one of those utility guys. I don't see him getting a big deal anywhere really, but not given what he's done so far, unless he just breaks out this year, which is possible. This tends to be the year when you own the fifth year option, you're in a prove it year. That's when you start to ball out and price yourself out of Baltimore. But considering, right, all things considered, I think he'll have a pretty decent season, but I don't know if it'll warrant him getting a big payday after the season. I think it could warrant him being re-signed for maybe another year to prove himself again, and then maybe go after the big deal. But it's just from what I've seen from Oweh, he's almost too raw, and I don't know. I still don't know if he has the pass rushing techniques down yet to be not even necessarily an elite pass rusher, but a pretty good pass rusher. Now, like I said before, they could play him in. See, but I think Bowser was a better rusher, but I feel like they could play him in a role of kind of like that utility role where they let him cover because he's got speed. They let him rush, maybe on some delayed stuff, maybe on some, maybe on some blitzes and stuff like that. And maybe he does get his one-on-one opportunities from time to time. Or maybe he surprises all of us and, he does his thing. I mean, that's going to be the real question, because he's on a prove it year, and that's typically when the Ravens ball out. So we'll see. We'll see. What do you guys think? Let me know below. What is Odafe Oweh's future with the Ravens look like? All right, last thing. I wasn't going to talk about this, oddly enough. I wasn't going to talk about this because I didn't even know this was a thing. I was doing a little research for the show, and I said, you know what, man, let me just see. Let me see. What's out here. Let me check the pulse of the flock and see what's going on. And unrelated note in terms of the Ravens, I guess, right? Unrelated note in terms of the Ravens, but RG3 is no longer a part of Monday Night Football coverage. Now I know RG3 has his own podcast, right? Like he has, he's doing his own thing. Um, you know, he's doing his own thing. He's kind of, he's got his own successful show. He's proven himself as a media personality, and I feel like RG3 brings something different. But oddly enough, it was in favor of Jason Kelsey, who also, has his own little podcast thing going on, and he, with Travis and all that. So very, very interesting. I just feel like it is, and I'll let y'all shout out to ML Football. I'll let y'all see the tweet at least when the news was broken to me. But it's just very, very interesting. So ML Football tweeted, breaking: ESPN has fired RG3, Robert Griffin III, from their Monday Night Football coverage team. NBC reports he will now be replaced by none other than Jason Kelsey. Now, I think, my personal opinion on this, and I don't talk about this type of stuff a lot, but this is interesting. Of course, RG3, former Raven, I think former Raven who had a lot to do with, I feel like he had a lot to do with Lamar Jackson's maturity, Lamar Jackson's, like Lamar Jackson's ability to get down, I think is in part due to RG3 and what RG3 has experienced, not only in the coaching ranks, but just in terms of just having to be, a mobile starting QB. Look, RG3 out of there for for ESPN. Shout out to the Third Perspective podcast. But next week, I promise, Rabbit, next week. But I feel like ESPN missed on this one. Not to say Jason Kelsey, also a great personality, lovable guy. He's kind of the new wave. Like people are really, really taking to him. But honestly, I feel like these two could have had some pretty good little conversations, in regards to the sport of football, right? In regards to Monday Night Football, breaking down the games and stuff. Because honestly, and not to discredit too much, but ESPN has a way of covering certain things, certain teams. And there was an interesting comment Skeptic Go put out there too that I meant to bring up. So let me pull this back up real quick for y'all, so I can see the comment because I meant to read that. But I feel like this could have been a good little 1-2 punch because you got a guy who's been there, future Hall of Famer, and a guy who had his career cut short by injuries, right? But Jason Kelsey has had his fair share of injuries too, and it just ain't been career ending for Jason Kelsey. But I think they dropped the ball on this. In my personal opinion, right? In my personal opinion, I think they dropped the ball on this because to me, RG3 was the most real guy you had, right? Like I said, there's no offense to the guys they have on ESPN, but sometimes the guys they have on ESPN, of course, they're going to listen to the producers and they're going to do their job and they're going to make their money, right? But RG3 almost felt unscripted, whether that was him and that's who he is and that, that's just the personality that he gives off, cool. Or it's possible that, they kind of gave him a little more creative freedom to be himself, to find himself in this space, and figure it out that way. So I think it's a miss. I think they missed on this one. I think they missed on having the 1-2 punch of these two guys, but I think they also missed on having one of the realest dudes. Like we talking about, and a guy who stuck up for the Ravens time and time again, a guy who stuck up for Lamar Jackson time and time again. And that's not just why I'm bringing this up, but he was a guy who kind of, it felt like, at least for Ravens fans who feel like the goalpost is constantly moved for how the Ravens and Lamar Jackson is criticized, or at least critiqued, I will say it felt like RG3 was mostly impartial, right? You know, he gave his opinion and he bowed out. He said, "Hey, I know Lamar," right? I mean, we've even seen like Michael Vick, for example, right? We've seen Michael Vick be in support of Lamar, and then things started to change a little bit. He started to get on the shows a little bit more, and then he was a little more critical of Lamar, even in times where maybe he shouldn't have been critical of Lamar, or at least in my opinion, he shouldn't have been critical of Lamar. But interestingly enough, I will say, I think they whiffed on this. And Skeptic Goat, I'm going to pull back up full screen for y'all so y'all can see, but Skeptic Goat, fellow Ravens fan, said, "Makes perfect sense if the goal is to remove the most entertaining personality at the network." Wow. And I agree, you know, and I think RG3 and Iron Sharpen below him said, you know, he loves Jason Kelce as much as the next guy, but to get rid of RG3 is a major L. You know, he loved listening to RG3. You know, he was funny, quick-witted, and exactly what you need for TV. And I agree. I agree. I feel like I said, I feel like RG3 felt like he was keeping it real, right? RG3 felt like one of us, you know? He felt like he was keeping it real. He felt like, hey, you know what? This how I feel. This what I'm gonna say. When it's time for him to cut the cord, they can cut the cord, but you ain't gonna never say that RG3 wasn't being genuine. And I think he gave that. I think he gave a passion for the game that sometimes we don't necessarily see too, and a passion for the game from a guy who has seen high levels of success, but kind of had that taken away from him in things that wasn't really necessarily in his control. So that's just how I feel about it. I don't know about y'all. I think losing RG3 is a big miss for ESPN. But that'll do it for Fly Nation Speaks for this episode. I definitely hope you guys enjoyed the show. I will definitely be back, I think, next week. I think Rapper's going to join me. We're going to talk all about this schedule. We're gonna deep dive into it, both the Ravens and the Bears schedule on the flock down perspective. So be sure to stay locked in, stay tuned, and definitely we'll be back next week. As always, Fly Nation Speaks is on all major podcasting platforms, so be sure to check the show out. Take the show with you. I mean, work is long, man. I ain't gonna lie to y'all. Work is long, okay? Work is long. Work is long. It's a long day out there, okay? It's a long day. But you know what? Instead of it being a long day, you can take Fly Nation Speaks with you. You can take Third Perspective Podcast with you too. Since he was here, he was live. He was somewhat in the conversation. Look, you can do what you got to do, all right? But Fly Nation Speaks on all major podcast platforms, so definitely check the show out. But we'll see you guys on the next episode of Flock Nation Speaks. Until